Hello and welcome to another Capital Ideas. I'm Sandy Behan and our guest this week is Senator Cal Hobson, Senate District 16. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
Yes, it's been a long, tiresome journey since February, hasn't it?
Was that long?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it has been. Lots of stuff has happened.
Okay, let's talk for just a little bit about some general things that are coming up. Now, you've been in session since February, correct?
Right.
And you're about to move in to what they call the conference phase, where the bills have been through committee, they've been to the floors of the House and the Senate, they've been reported out in some fashion or other, and now you got to figure out a way to make them satisfy both sides, right?
That's right. You're down to the tough part. You've got to make sure that the version that the House wants and the version that the Senate wants is absolutely identical when it comes out of the conference, and then those conference reports go down to the governor for his signature. The big deal, the big conference that really is the important one and will take an awful lot of time now is the General Conference Committee on Appropriations, and we will proceed to write the budget for fiscal 98. We have significant growth money. That is good. We also have extraordinary demands, which can be good and can be bad, but I'm hopeful that we can continue our pattern of the last 6 years and allocate the majority of the growth money to education.
The conference report that came out this week on the truth in sentencing. Now, the kids are going to ask you some questions about that, so I don't want to get into anything too specific right now, but having resolved that issue and the amount of dollars it's going to take to do all of that, does that help the appropriations issue once you identify out the degree to which you're going to need funds for that?
It will actually help, because instead of having a day-to-day plan literally in managing the correction system in Oklahoma or the criminal justice system in Oklahoma, we now for the first time have a 10-year plan, a 10-year blueprint through 2007 that tells us revenue needs, tells us population growth, and puts in place community treatment programs for the nonviolent offenders that I have said in this chair with you for going on decades now, that we could treat more cheaply in the community and reserve the expensive lockup facilities for the truly dangerous. Those people, as we were talking earlier, are now going to go away for almost forever. They're going to do 85% of time given by the judges, and cumulatively that is 54% more time than they're doing now.
Okay. And then as you look at, there was a thing in the paper this morning about the fact that Oklahoma currently is last in the nation in terms of technology in the schools, that most of our computers are from the 1980s and can't do the sophisticated programming that businesses and higher ed and expect us, or even personal computing, expect us to be able to do.
Right.
And the State Department of Education has I think it's a $65 million request for money for that particular purpose. Now, I know that's not the only thing that's out there, because higher ed needs money, VOTEC needs money, Common Ed needs other kinds of money as well. What is the status of all of that?
The status of all of that is in play now, effective Monday as we start the General Conference. I would say, as unpleasant as that article was this morning, can you imagine where we would have been in this state if you and other educators had not literally forced the legislature in 1990 to pass House Bill 1017 that has infused $2.1 billion of new money into our schools. We've talked about for years here how Norman is an island of excellence within a sea of mediocrity in many ways. What you're describing is one of the great flaws of the Oklahoma educational system. There are indeed great schools with modern computers and great labs, all that. I've been to your computer lab. But the vast majority of our schools are years behind in that area, and we are intent on ensuring that technology is front-loaded in the appropriation bill this year. We can't get to $65 million, but we can make a major effort, a first of a multiple-year effort to change what you just described.
Okay, let's talk about something else that not last necessarily, but one of the 10 worst in the country, as reported by the media again, and that is health care and health habits among the people of the state. And that leads immediately into some other health issues that have come up recently with the, I guess, flap is as good a word, over Columbia and the building of hospitals, and what's going to happen with the health care here in Oklahoma.
Boy, you're in a negative mood this morning, aren't you? We're talking about last in computers, towards the bottom in healthcare, but you're, as usual, right. Oklahomans have terrible habits in many ways. We are one of the leading states when it comes to smoking. We are one of the leading states in obesity. Our teenage pregnancy rate is too high. Our divorce rate in Oklahoma City is second to Las Vegas in the country. We have too many underweight babies being born. All that leads to that report that shows us in the bottom 10. What are we doing about it? Well, our healthcare authority is a fairly new creation, last 2 to 3 years, and it is the agency responsible for the allocation of the Medicaid money, which goes to the very young and those who are not eligible for Medicare for health treatment. We are going to have a good year in that arena, but much of what you describe are personal choices that people make on their own about what they do to their own bodies. We are going to push the issue as much as we can, but much of it, as I said, is driven by a personal decision. The issue of Columbia HCA, the hospital issue, it's very important that we divide this fight into two parts. The one part relates to the issue that concerns Norman. And does Norman need or want a second hospital to provide medical care to its citizens? From what I am hearing by phone and letter, the vast majority of the Norman citizens think they are well served by Norman Regional, and they do not want a competitor in the community, don't think it's needed. That's one issue. And there is a bill moving through that creates a quasi certificate of need approach that would force Columbia to prove the need for the facility. Can I go to the second issue real quick? That is up to the city now, the ongoing discussion with Columbia and its desire to partner with our university hospital, our School of Medicine, all of that. That issue boiled to a head literally last night. And I'm a little bit out on a limb here, but I believe that an agreement will be struck to have that partnership. I come down on the side that that's necessary because of the immediate infusion of operating and capital money that Columbia will provide. If they don't do that, if we don't partner, then we have to find those additional revenues if we're going to maintain the School of Medicine as one of the best 20 or 25 in the country, and the university hospital that provides the indigent care that poor people must have.
Okay. We've got just a few minutes before we bring the kids back on, so I'll stay on a negative note because the kids are going to ask you some questions that are going to allow you to talk about some good things, I promise.
Well, it's about time.
Okay. Let's talk about dumpsters and airplanes.
Dumpsters and airplanes.
Yeah, one of the things that I perceive as tying up the legislature, and specifically I would guess the Senate, all of this session has been the investigation over the governor's airplane.
Yes.
And I guess my question is, what's the status of that? Because if you read the newspapers, it's real hard to figure out what's going on.
Right. It has not tied my time up because I'm not on that particular special committee. The issue arose out of allegations that there was a sweetheart deal between the Department of Public Safety and Tulsa Air, which is a firm in Tulsa that was the winning bidder on the $2.9 million aircraft, new aircraft for the governor. Let me state up front, I supported the purchase of an aircraft. The governor felt the plane that the state had, and I've flown in it many times, was not airworthy, was not safe. So I want him to feel safe and comfortable. The issue, though, is was there a cozy relationship? Did Tulsa Air get advance information? There are documents that indicate that there was dialogue only with them prior to the bids going out. There's information that indicated that the governor's wife looked at the aircraft, picked out the colors, all that routine. How important is all this? not vary unless there was indeed illegal or inappropriate collusion, then it is very important that that not happen again and that laws be written to guarantee that it won't. That's the heart of the airplane flap.
Okay, now, irrespective of the legality issue, is this part of the whole tension, if you will, between the governor's office and the legislature that's been going on now for 2 odd years?
I think you need to separate it on 2 tracks. The first 2 years were very contentious, led to a record number of vetoes, which, and I believe he regrets. I think he regrets it because we have restored most of that money. Most of it, by the way, was in law enforcement agencies, and he's signed that in supplementals now. So I think, you know, if you peel all the politics away, he'd say, yeah, I kind of regret those vetoes. That contentiousness led up to the elections of '96, and as you know, he flew around the state trying to beat Democrats, didn't beat anybody, and I think a kind of a peace was announced in November. I have enjoyed that peace, and I felt it's worked well as we've worked through difficult issues like the criminal justice package. The airplane issue is a side note that is a carryover from that fight. But the internal workings of the legislature and the governor's office has, I think, have been very cooperative so far, and I see no reason that it won't continue through the end of May.
So at this point anyway, you don't anticipate him doing what he did last year, which is approving the bills that set up the agencies or said that we were going to do these things and then vetoed the appropriations that would have paid for them, like for example, the career teacher salary bill.
Exactly right, and like the indigent defense system here in Norman has 75 white-collar jobs. We had an agreement on their supplemental, which simply means get them through till 30 June, and then you obviously have to fund the next year. Those were the kinds of vetoes that I think were ill-conceived and not helpful to the state. I don't think that will reoccur. I do think that there will be things we won't agree on, and our number might be too high or his is too high, or some substantive bill. That's okay. That's always been the process. But just this slam dunk veto because of some philosophical argument not based in fact is not what we ought to do.
Okay. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment with 2 students from Central Mid High School. We're back with our student guests this week, Michael Hobson and Sarah Jefferson. And I believe, Michael, you get to ask Uncle Cal the first question.
Do you think that legislative action could solve or prevent social problems?
Sometimes in the first half of the program, if you were listening while you were sitting over there, and I hope you were, there are a number of social issues that government brings its weight to bear on, like the health of little children, the medical care of the elderly, but there are some issues that the more we try, it seems that people are resistant to doing the right thing for their own bodies. So if somebody wants to smoke, it's their right in this country to do so as long as it doesn't interfere with how you live. So yes and no is the short answer.
What are some solutions that the legislature can do to strengthen families?
We try to take the limited resources that your parents pay, called taxes, and emphasize the very issue you've raised. If you have dysfunctional families, and we've got a lot of them in Oklahoma. You know, we were talking about the divorce rate earlier and about the teenage pregnancy rate. Those things cost you a lot of money at the front end. They cost you even more at the back end. About 70% of the inmates that come down to Lexington come from broken, dysfunctional families where alcohol or other drugs was in prevalent use, where child abuse was the standard daily business in the home. So what government tries to do, we have in your county here in Cleveland County, the Human Resources or Human Services building up here on Robinson, and that's where families often go when they have these problems. But government can only do so much. Communities really can be more valuable in the facilities and the programs they provide, and Norman is lucky. Norman has a lot of those community-based activities, like the Women's Resource Center, that help mothers and wives that are in trouble.
What do you think the legislature can do to stop drug abuse?
Well, we pass laws that are tough as can be on offenders. There's an image, you know, that maybe Oklahoma is soft on crime. Nothing further could be from the truth. If you do drugs in Oklahoma right now, there's every chance that you're going to have sanctions as far as county jail and imprisonment on the first offense. If you do lots of drugs, or if you sell lots of drugs in Oklahoma, the sentences are quite severe. And I would just tell you, we talked earlier about the criminal justice package that passed this week. When it goes into effect, Mike, 1 July of 1998, a year from now, the penalties for selling significant amounts of illegal drugs will send those inmates into our prison system for at least 50% more time than they're doing today. And inmates in Oklahoma do, on average, more time than inmates in other states. So that's the punishment side. The smarter side is the preventive side, and that is on the front end, again, with strong families, parental involvement, great teachers, school guidance. You just don't start. And we've learned, just like smoking, if young kids don't start with that experimental age 11, here, take a puff off this, it'll make you feel good. If you don't start that path, you won't ever get on it. And so if we can keep the younger ones from thinking it's cool to experiment, and I don't have the solution, obviously, but the more of that we can be successful in, the less money you'll have to pay, you too will have to pay in the very near future, because you will be, the dreaded word, a taxpayer someday.
Okay, what can we do to stop the growing juvenile crime?
It's a funny thing. What's happening in America right now, and it's happening throughout the country, and it's happening dramatically in the big cities. The violent crime rate and the overall crime rate is dropping like a rock. The murder rate in New York City has dropped all the way to what it was in 1968, and it's happening throughout the country. But at the same time, while the adult crime rate is going down in most crimes, the juvenile crime rate, and especially the violent juvenile crime rate, is going up. What are we doing about it? Well, we're adding a significant number of what we call secure or detention beds for these young predatory offenders to isolate them from society. It's a tragedy to say that at 13, 14, 15, 16, kids younger than you two, that they cannot function in society without physically hurting others. But we have come to accept that at least on a temporary basis, they have to be removed from society. For the ones that are less violent, we have developed a statewide network, not complete yet, but getting there, of alternative schools. You have one of the best ones here in Norman. Raymond Macy ran it for several years, and she's coming back, I think, to the high school.
Yes.
Those kinds of things are the steps that government can take. But government cannot replace a mother and a father and a church and a school. And I think those are the major, and grandparents. Those are the major ingredients to make sure young Mike and young Sarah turn out to be the wonderful students that they are.
What are some solutions that we can do to stop teen pregnancy?
Well, the simple one that lots of people like, just like to chant, you know, just don't do it, or abstinence. That's right. That'll sure work. Will teenagers, young men like yourself at 15 pay much attention to me if I sat you down during a family meal, say, Mike, this is Uncle Cal and he wants to talk to you about you-know? Well, my guess is you're going to say, let's go play basketball and get out of my face, right?
Probably.
Right. So that one suggestion's a fine one, but it's not enough. I think teenagers need to understand that sex is no longer just a fun game that you casually enter into. It can be a death sentence, because the issue of AIDS, about the time you were being born, AIDS was being discovered. Now, if you make a mistake and have sex with somebody that's infected, I don't know what the percent is, the chance that you will be infected, but if you are, that is not a maybe, that is not a get a second chance, that is a death penalty under what we know today in America. Now, the wonderful drugs are helping to extend, but to my knowledge, they have not discovered a cure or a vaccine.
No, and the ones that do work are expensive as all get out, which gets back to the health care issue.
Thousands and thousands of dollars per year just to provide that medicine. Those are the factors at play in your lives that didn't exist when I was growing up. And you know, the sexual pressures, I think, are greater today than when I was a boy on a farm at Wayne, Oklahoma. You know, we had a TV set with 2 channels that came on, believe it or not, at 5 in the afternoon and went off at 10. I've seen you. Well, you don't have cable, and you're proud of that, and I think in many ways that's good. Most homes have cable, and they dial up 30 channels or 50 channels. There's a lot of video stuff that's pretty graphic, pretty violent, pretty sexual. So I think you all have a much tougher job dealing with the issue than I ever did.
How much money are common schools going to get this year?
The education forces have done something very smart, Sandy, and students today. They've come together as a group rather than pitting Common Ed against Higher Ed versus VOTEC. They are all working together, and their request is $205 million of the growth money. Big number. The growth number is $285 million. We can't give education all that they're requesting because there are many other functions of government to fund. My guess is Common Ed, if we're fortunate, we'll get about $75 million. Higher Ed, if we are really lucky, about $71 million new. VOTEC, $12 million or so. So we're going to get as close to their request as we can, but we are never quite able to get all the way there. But it'll be a very good year for schools once again.
I think you guys talked about it earlier, but would you basically describe the new criminal justice proposal?
People should not fear that it is 600 pages and it's incomprehensible. It is 600 pages, but 400 of those pages simply take the current sentencing codes, like if you do marijuana or you rob a bank, and repeal all those current guidelines and then fold those new guidelines into what I've described as the grid, which is, it's simply a matrix that says if you do this crime, you're going to do 85% of this amount of time. And the judge can vary a little bit, but a big important part of this, and some are for it and some are against it, but jury sentencing is gone, except for capital offenses, which means murder convictions. Why do you want to remove the juries? Well, only 4 states have jury sentencing. Does it make any sense to give somebody 1,000 years, you know, when you go to prison? I think it makes the juries feel good, but the truth is, under the laws of the state of Oklahoma, unless you're sentenced to the death penalty or to life without parole, you're basically eligible for parole consideration the minute you walk in the door. Now, that doesn't happen, but I think we're better served without the jury sentencing and have the professionalism of the judge, who can take into consideration prior violations upon sentencing, whereas juries, you might have 10 offenses. The jury is not supposed to know currently that you've been a bad boy all your life when you show up to be sentenced.
I have one more question on that. Oh, what was it? Go ahead.
We'll just make something up.
You said that this will increase the time criminals will have to pay in jail. This will make them do more time in jail.
That's right.
Will the jail system be able to hold these new people?
That's a good question. We're expanding the system over the next 10 years by an additional 6,000 high security cells. Sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but think about that. That's only a growth rate of about 500 to 600 beds a year. We've been growing at 2,000 beds a year over the last 2 years. So we're going to have a more orderly growth plan for the violent, repetitive offenders. So you should then say, well, where are these other yahoos that are breaking the law? What are you going to do with them? That's going to be the hard part. We're going to ask communities, churches, volunteer groups, and state and county government to have community programs, the full array of treatment programs that really these people are crying out for. 80% of them that come to prison have a drug or alcohol abuse problem. We need to start treating on the front end, intervening first, instead of waiting until they've screwed up so much that you got to use your expensive prison space for low-level, nonviolent offenders. That's the package.
I wanted to move to Oklahoma, live here. What kind of job prospects would there be?
Could not be better. A report came out yesterday that put Oklahoma second in the nation in the creation not of hamburger flipping jobs, but of good, strong manufacturing jobs. We were second only to the state of Washington. Our growth pattern has led the Midwest, our competitive states, month after month over the last several years. So if you're wanting to work in Oklahoma today, jobs are available to you, and they are good jobs, not just the low-skill minimum wage jobs that too often have been a part of our economy.
Now, see, I promised you, we started out talking about we were last in the nation, and we got us up to second in the nation on a good note.
Well, thanks to Sarah, not thanks to you.
But you know.
Oh, you're telling me you told her to ask that.
No, actually, he did. Doesn't matter. We got the information.
Got the point out there. That's
okay.
right.
I want to thank you very much for being here. I know it's been a very hectic year, week,
Yep.
day / whatever, and we appreciate that very much. Hopefully, the session will turn out the way you want it to, and hopefully, we'll see you back here next fall.
I'm looking forward to it.
And we'll be back next week with another Capital Ideas.